So welcome to the first Animal Reiki info call. Just want to say thank you for being here, and also thank you to everyone else who has signed up and might be recording or watching this recording later, joining in with us later. So we're going to start with a few moments of grounding and centering meditation using one of the practices from the system of Reiki that Animal Reiki is built on. And then I'll tell you a little bit about the practice, just some things that come to me today to share, and then we'll talk about some of those questions that were sent in as well, and we can kind of open it up for some just live Q&A and conversation about it, and just see where that conversation goes. So for right now, I invite you to just go ahead and take a nice mindful moment with yourself. It's so wonderful and valuable and important to allow ourselves to take these spaces throughout the day whenever we need them. And of course, the first step is always beginning to notice when we need them, or even just to build them into the day on purpose, so that we have that space available for ourselves and we're not packing our schedule too full or rushing or feeling stressed or hurried, moving between things too quickly. And this is not always something that we are raised thinking or knowing. And so as an adult, we get the interesting experience of beginning to train ourselves in a new way, to open up new spaces for stillness and peace and purposefulness and gentleness with ourselves, and then practicing again and again with that same intention and that same gentleness. And so our first step in this dance is simply noticing how we're feeling in this moment. Beginning to tune into ourselves. And beginning to tune into our breath. The breath can be a wonderful focal point. With so many interesting facets to occupy the busy, curious, analytical mind. Can begin to feel the path of the breath moving in through our nose, down into our lungs, feeling our chest expanding. And as we continue to notice, we can also begin to intentionally lengthen that breath. Letting it extend past our lungs, as if that breath can fill the belly as well. You may notice at first the belly may feel tight or rigid, as if you're holding it in. And so this moment can be an invitation to let that belly gently relax and soften. Letting the belly begin to become a part of your breath. Letting this breath be full down into the belly, which in traditional Reiki, we refer to this area as the hara. The hara is a common concept in Eastern traditions, thought of as the source of our strength and our energy and our connection with this universal energy that we all have. And so as we breathe into the hara, we are accessing our own energy. And we're helping to increase that energy and build a stable platform, a foundation for all of our life and all of our practice. By creating this gentle but strong platform, we are also creating more strength and stability so that we can show up for others in our life and create spaces for peace and for healing for them to enjoy as well, to feel nourished by, to feel supported by. If our energy is unstable and chaotic, we can't hold those wonderful, strong yet gentle spaces, or at least not as efficiently or as comfortably or as well. When we practice, we're helping to stabilize ourselves, helping ourselves and our energy to be clear and calm and focused. With each breath, continuing to let the belly rise and expand on the in-breath. Letting the belly gently fall on the out-breath. We begin to practice breathing in this deeper, fuller way. That will help us naturally to feel more at peace and centered and calm whenever we need it. So we're going to take a few more moments now of just gently breathing in silence together. And as you continue to gently breathe in fully into the belly, you may begin to notice some extra warmth or stillness or a feeling of solidness, heaviness, as if you're in deeper connection with the earth below you, touching your feet. And you may even begin to feel as though you are becoming intrinsically part of your surroundings. So perhaps you begin to feel like you're melting into your chair, or as if there's no difference, no separation between you and that surface that you're seated on. So we'll take this time together, simply breathing in and breathing out. Feeling this sense of connection within, with our hara, with our surroundings, and with each other. And as we continue to move forward throughout this conversation and throughout the rest of our day, I invite you to remember the feeling of this practice. And you can also continue to practice with that long, deep breath, nice and stable, centered, feeling that presence of our own inner peace and contentment and well-being, feeling that wonderful connection with Reiki energy, our own source, and just knowing that anything that comes up for you that doesn't feel like that description is also just part of the process. Sometimes we have layers of things that are accumulated and they pop up now and then to be helped along their way. And so whatever you experience, whatever is true for you moment to moment, it's just an opportunity, an invitation to continue to practice and also to just gently observe things coming and going, thoughts that move in and out. We can practice a wonderful principle of non-attachment, just simply watching, noticing those thoughts in the mind that come and go, waiting it out until they just move on their way without latching on and believing everything that we hear in our minds or that we think. That kind of practice will help us a lot in our practice in general, for our self-care, for our relationships with others, for our Reiki practice, professional practice with others, or volunteer practice with others. It so much starts with that practice at home, within ourselves, beginning to learn more about our own inner landscape, our own inner workings, what is fluid, what is transient, all the different ways that those things come and go. It helps us to work with the precepts. It helps us to develop empathy and compassion for others and for ourselves as well. So breathing into the belly is a wonderful practice. I invite you to continue with that, like I say, throughout this hour, throughout your evening or your day, whatever time of day it is for you at the moment, and just whenever you need it moving forward. I also want to take a moment to just offer an opportunity to jot down anything you might be feeling at this moment, anything that might have come to you during the meditation, and also if anyone needs a little moment for some water or tea. When we're practicing meditation, we may need more water to help our bodies through the whatever process we're experiencing at that moment, whether it's a cleansing or a growing experience or just that warmth. It's always good to have some water. I'm going to pull up some of the wonderful questions that were submitted. So I had one request for just some general information about this practice, which I am completely happy to share. I also had a question about how can Reiki help us with deep and nourishing self-care. So I think we've actually already kind of dived into that one a little bit in an experiential way. So that will be a nice thing to also, I think that's a really wonderful way of thinking about Reiki practice. So we can come back to that one too a little bit more. And then I also received a question asking, can one send Reiki to an aggressive dog to calm him down? And I think there are some really wonderful principles at play in that question too, that we can kind of unpack and see what Animal Reiki offers us in that kind of a situation. So just to give a little brief introduction for those who may be coming to this information from, I assume everyone comes from different backgrounds with Reiki. There's so many different practices of Reiki and styles of Reiki, and also different experience levels with Reiki. Some people are just starting out, just beginning and just a sponge and wanting to soak it all up. And others maybe have been working with it for years and are curious about different new approaches or different ways they might think about their practice and tweak and adjust and add to it. So we'll just give a little bit of orientation and that general information. So, well, first of all, my name is Kat, and I am a certified teacher in an approach known as Animal Reiki. That's what I like to call it, to kind of really highlight our relationship with our animal healing partners. And I'm also a certified teacher in a form of Reiki that's considered a traditional or Eastern form of Reiki, trying to go back to the origins of Reiki, the way it was originally being taught by the founder, Mikao Usui. So kind of a blend. Animal Reiki is, in fact, a set of practices that were adapted out of those traditional Reiki practices. So they're really actually very interlinked. I think Animal Reiki also has some really beautiful ways of helping us to even learn more about Reiki, about our experience of Reiki, and how we can offer it to others, including humans, in even more expansive and thoughtful and respectful and gentle ways. So I think Animal Reiki actually has a really beautiful opportunity for us as Reiki practitioners or as individuals to learn more about offering Reiki to humans as well. So I like to remember and remind people that we are also animals, we are also creatures, and so we're really not different in that way. All of those differences are just creations of the mind, but sometimes we really take those for granted. And so it's nice to also take a step back and look at our relationship with other species as well as with our own species in new ways, perhaps. So the traditional Reiki practices, originally Reiki was a set of meditation practices and mindfulness practices and mindset practices that help us to really develop spiritually and personally. I like to say now that I really think they help us to become a better human. So we're becoming more, we're in a sense approaching an understanding of what it might be like to become an enlightened being. If we were to reach enlightenment, we might, transform into another form in that moment. So most likely in our lifetimes, maybe none of us will actually become an enlightened being, but these are practices that we're on the path towards enlightenment or towards discovering enlightened ways of thinking. So we have multiple different types of practices and approaches that were originally taught by the founder, whose name was Mikao Usui. He put these practices together almost just about 100 years ago now. And there was a period of time in which some people who've been doing some really wonderful research have been able to kind of trace a little bit more of this for us so that we can understand that it wasn't something that just all appeared all at once, like magically out of the air. There were traditions already in place in Japan that he was drawing on and bringing elements of different practices together in maybe a new combination. So we have something called the Japanese Reiki Precepts, which were written in the Japanese language. And we have seen them over the years get translated into, of course, many different languages, as well as many different translations within the same language. So my native language is English, and I live in the United States, and I have seen so many different versions of the precepts, even just in my years with Reiki, many different ways that they've been translated, even just within English. So the practice that I work with tries to translate them from the original Japanese in a way that's very faithful to the original intentions, the best that we can understand them, because of course Mikao Usui is not here to tell us directly what he had in mind. So a lot of this is an art of translation and doing our best to put it into a spiritual context and a historical context. So this practice really tries I think, very, very deeply to understand the roots of Reiki in that way, and of things like the precepts. So the precepts are principles, a guideline for healthier living. Maybe that's a way we might put it in today's language. Part of this mindset that I mentioned, helping us to become a better person, helping us to, and he called them a spiritual medicine for all illness. And I think that's a really beautiful way to understand it very quickly. That when we change the way that our, say, self-talk, or even our speech towards others, when we start changing the way that we think, we start changing the way that we feel, we start changing the way our body feels, and through dedicated practice, we can also elevate ourselves. We can elevate our mind, we can elevate our speech, and therefore we can also elevate our physical body. So if we're experiencing lots of, say, chronic pain, there's a great example. A lot of times that can actually be transformed in ways that we didn't expect. So maybe it's not about just pain management or pain regulation, but also maybe transforming underlying experiences where that pain is coming from. So there's a very intricate and complex system going on, or mechanism going on within all of our own minds and bodies. And these practices can actually help to simplify that, so that we can have an easier experience, hopefully, during our time here on Earth. So, so we have the precepts, we have meditation practices as part of the system of Reiki. And we did a little bit of experiencing with that at the start of the conversation today, drawing on one of the traditional Reiki practices that helps us to begin to focus the mind on something, using the breath, using the hara as a focal point, helping to develop our strength, our energy, as I said, so that it can be a strong platform, a foundation that will build all the rest of our practice on top of, so that we are, as a Reiki practitioner, we are very grounded in our energy, we are strong, we are stable, we are quietly confident, and we can be sustained, and we can sustain our practice for others, so that we can be there to hold space for them, to help facilitate spaces of healing for them. It all begins with us and with our practice, and we really need to be very dedicated and consistent. So these traditional Reiki practices, I've found, have been much more helpful for me in that way, in ways that I didn't even realize I needed at a certain point. And then once I started experiencing them over time and making my practice with them more consistent and more complete, really things started to open up for me. And I was able to actually practice in a deeper way. I would actually, for myself at least, I would say probably in a better way, because I felt more sustained. I felt more energy. I felt more capacity, more potential being realized in my practice. And then I was also able to hold that same space more consistently and more comfortably when I was with other beings as well, whether humans or with animals. And that is really important to me. It was really meaningful to me to get to have that experience. So I really think these are wonderful practices that help us to expand our practice in really healthy ways. Reiki should never feel, really ultimately, it shouldn't feel depleting or draining. And these practices help us to see that and help us to experience what it feels like when our practice is whole and complete and healthy and replenishing, right? Nourishing, as opposed to taking something away. We're actually adding something to ourselves. And what else do we have? We have hands-on healing, or treatments is another element of traditional Reiki. So we have practices known as self-Reiki, or hands-on healing for the self, and we have hand positions. We have multiple ways that has developed as well, possibly beyond the way that Mikao Usui originally thought about it. But I think really the ultimate goal is this kind of intuitive relationship with Reiki and with the body, so that we're letting go of those trappings of the mind again. So we're not attaching to any particular hand positions over time. We're moving into a space of more like a dance with energy, and our hands being an extension of our entire being that's radiating Reiki. So that's an important principle that we see coming up in Animal Reiki. And I think one of the ways that Animal Reiki really teaches us a lot about Reiki is that it ends up being not so much about our hands as we're initially taught. sometimes in, at least in more westernized forms of Reiki, like what I originally studied in. I really had this idea in my mind that it was very much about what we might have said at the time would be something like channeling Reiki energy from the universe and out through our hands. In traditional Reiki, it's about being Reiki. It's a whole different paradigm, you could say. It's a whole different concept. And it feels different to me in my body when I feel or say those two things. I actually feel a whole different relationship with it. So it's an interesting thing to try on for size and to really learn about more deeply, I think. When we're being Reiki, we're being in connection with our hara, as we experienced in the meditation today. Our hara then is one with our entire being. We're not separate from our hara. We're not separate from Reiki energy. We are Reiki energy. Therefore, if we didn't have hands, or if we sat on our hands, we could still be practicing Reiki. We could be sharing that space with others. And that's what I think Animal Reiki really highlights so well for us. And I'll come back to that in just a second and kind of explain that a little bit. And then we have also within the traditional system of Reiki, we have symbols and mantras. Another thing that I think is really interesting about traditional Reiki is that it brings in some chanting practices that were often lost or left out of the westernized forms of Reiki. So we get to have that experience, which was something that Mikao Usui was teaching his students. Even before he taught the symbols, he taught mantras that correspond to each of the symbols as we know them. And then we also have something called Reiju. And that is what is sometimes called initiations or attunements. In the Japanese, it was a Reiju. It's a spiritual blessing. It's a way of helping us to feel that presence of Reiki energy in ourselves. And so a Reiju is sort of a teacher-facilitated way for helping another individual, whether a student or a client, perhaps, to continually feel that sense of connection with their own energy source within inside themselves, because all of it comes from inside of us. No one's giving us the ability to practice Reiki. We already have that capacity, but we can help be guided into an understanding of how to experience that for ourselves. So Reiju is one way that we can help have that facilitated experience. So then Animal Reiki is a set of practices brought together into our awareness by someone named Kathleen Prasad, who is still out there teaching now. She's very much a major pioneer in the field of Reiki. And I studied with her. I found my way to her through the powers of the internet. And as soon as I started reading her work, I felt a strong resonance within inside myself. She was putting words to things that I had been experiencing and not able to articulate yet. And it just really clicked for me. And so these practices have been personally very meaningful and very, very helpful because it helped over the years. It's helped teach me, I think, more expansive ways, as I said, more respectful ways of being gentle in my offering of Reiki to others without expectation, without demand, without force, without ego getting in the way. And it's all a process of kind of letting ourselves begin to have that experience if it wasn't something natural to us to begin with. Some people may be more inclined in that way than others, of course. So one of the things that I think is so interesting and helpful about these approaches of Animal Reiki, well, for one thing, it really invites us to a very professional demeanor and relationship with Reiki and with others, no matter whether we're volunteering or just practicing at home. It really offers us options for developing a very respectful and professional way of carrying ourselves as we go out into the world. This is that idea of Reiki as a lifestyle, living the precepts as a lifestyle, taking on a code of ethics and a code of practice and really practicing that wherever we are. Those are very important things as Reiki practitioners. And as any kind of professional in any profession, hopefully that would be an ideal to strive towards and a goal. Another thing that I think is really significant in Animal Reiki is this practice of learning how to offer Reiki sessions without touch and beginning our sessions in that way. So that's been a really significant teaching for me personally as a practitioner and also as a teacher. I emphasize that a lot in my classes, and I see how that is a journey for a lot of people, especially when we've already learned Reiki. When we come to Animal Reiki, often we have grown very attached to the idea of touch or using our hands in a way to like direct energy, or sometimes people say give Reiki or do Reiki. And often that's based around the concept of needing to be near them, or that our hands are somehow sending Reiki in a direction. Animal Reiki really invites us to experience Reiki in, I think, a more complete way, in a more holistic way that's not so much focused on touch or on our hands, or on directing it or sending it in specific ways or to specific needs or conditions. There's so much more we could say about that, but that's just a little bit of a taste of what this practice entails or involves. And I think that hands-free Reiki treatments is another one of those ways that it helps us to actually be able to offer Reiki in so many more situations, because we can really then sit and practice Reiki near a wild animal, or with a fish that we're not going to maybe hold still, or an animal that's experienced trauma, or a human that's experienced trauma. That's a great example. A patient who's had burns over their body, we're not going to walk up to them and place our hands on them and think that that's going to be comfortable. True also if they have experienced some kind of abuse or trauma, no matter what your species, touch may not always be comfortable for everyone. And so this is a way that we don't even need to get next to them. So with Animal Reiki, we actually start from 5 or 10 feet away, sometimes even further. And we're still able to feel that same wonderful sense of connection with them, and be able to witness that they are showing us through their body language, through their affect and the way they're carrying themselves, that they are also participating in that session. So there's ways that we can gauge how they're feeling about that offer. We can tweak things in the way that we're offering. If we're getting a little bit too focused, or if we're getting a little bit of our expectations maybe are coming up and getting in the way, we're looking to see if they're having some kind of benefit, right? Then we can take note, take a moment for ourselves, shift again, bring our practice back to that place of just openness and respect and humility and being Reiki. So we're always practicing being Reiki with another individual, releasing that focus on our hands, feeling our hara being part of the process, breathing, doing the practice, and just allowing whatever experience that animal wants to have, or like I say, or that human, as the case may be. I think this can really transform a lot of our Reiki treatments with humans as well. Even if touch is part of that treatment, I think the whole mindset shift can be really helpful. So yeah, so that's a little overview to just the very basics, the foundations of these practices, and a little bit about how they've been helpful for me and meaningful for me. So I think this question about the aggressive dog is a really interesting one to move into, because there's a couple things here that we might be able to talk about in kind of a brief way. So one is this concept about sending Reiki, which I actually did mention a little bit. I would suggest in this practice, we would bring our awareness into this idea that we are being Reiki with. So that's one thing to think about, that Reiki doesn't really have a direction. It's not coming from us and going to someone else. We say that we're helping to facilitate a space for healing or for peace, for that other individual to get to deeply relax and let their own capacity for self-healing to occur. So that's something we're helping to facilitate through our deep and dedicated practice, getting more strength in our own experience of Reiki energy, getting more stillness and calm and peace within ourselves, and we can sit calmly with them, practicing being Reiki and letting them take part in whatever way is right for them at that moment. So that kind of flows into the second part of the question about offering to a specific condition. And I think that's a really beautiful intention, that we want to also help people or animals with health conditions or behaviors that they might be experiencing. I would suggest or offer just an invitation to really let our mindset be very, very open and expansive. Maybe that will be the condition that will receive some benefit. and maybe something else could transform. And this could be like a domino effect. So maybe one thing will be the thing that we'll notice right away or in a few weeks' time. And maybe eventually other things will then kind of come down also, like the line of dominoes knocking into each other. Sometimes transformation happens in interesting ways and unpredictable ways. So whenever we're looking to offer for a specific condition or behavioral issue, I think that's a great moment for us to just check in with ourselves and let our practice be very, very open and expansive, and just trust that whatever that individual wants to experience is going to be what's right for them to experience. If, and especially in the case with dogs, this can become very significant, I think, with animals in particular, because they will, in these very subtle ways that maybe we don't even fully understand yet, they will pick up on our mindset and our intentions. They will kind of read us emotionally in all of those subtle instinctive ways that we also do this too as humans. We read other people and we read situations, and we're not always correct in that interpretation, but we're always assessing and reading even when we're not conscious of it. And so animals are really aware in that subtle way too. And so the most important thing we can do is to keep working on ourselves. The more that we can get into that calm, peaceful, centered space, it sounds so simple, and yet it really can take some very dedicated practice to really be letting go of looking for specific outcomes to happen or wanting a specific condition to change. Really just getting at peace and accepting whatever wants to happen and whatever might be right for them, I think is really the best, most open possibility. And then we'll be also content with whatever happens. Most likely, if we are in that place, an animal will be willing to meet us there too. And they'll be able to settle down. They may lie down for the time that we're sitting in that Reiki meditation. We might see them yawn, they might sigh, they might look a little more content and peaceful. Some other animals, it's all about balance. Reiki is all about balance. So another animal that maybe is not feeling so well, we might see them perk up a little bit. Maybe they'll move around more. So it really depends on what's going on. But just remember, the Reiki is all about balance. So I think it's very likely that an animal that is experiencing some fear or some stress or trauma or other types of anxiety that might lead to an expression that's more vocal or even aggressive, as we get more peaceful with them in these spaces for Reiki, these times for Reiki, it can also help open up that opportunity for them to also feel more of that deeper peace and balance for themselves. And I would say just keep practicing, and also practicing with openness, and just practice the openness itself. That will help over time all of those pieces to begin to shift and transform. Deep and nourishing self-care is also such a relevant piece, especially when we are in a position for either caring for others, so other humans, or caring for animals. Maybe we are involved in animal rescue. Maybe we have taken in some individuals into our life, or have just, we're in relationships with people who maybe have some health needs or stress or anxiety. Or we just live in a lifestyle that involves a lot of high pressure, demands, stress, lots of different personality types, people in conflict, or maybe we live in an area with lots of traffic and people get more aggressive on the road and driving and honking, living in a fast-paced society. That is often something we may experience. Or maybe we are around people who sometimes, react and get very expressive with emotions or anger. All of those things can impact us emotionally, spiritually, psychologically as well. And so Reiki is a really wonderful practice for helping us to process in a healthy way all of those different experiences, as well as at the same time strengthening ourselves so that those types of experiences actually take less of a toll. So it's a dual benefit. So not only are we able to move through those experiences as they're happening, with them taking less of an impact on us, but we can also heal whatever might need to be rebalanced or healed or restored within ourselves if they do take a toll on us. And it just keeps going. These ripple effects keep going. So the more that we practice, the more that we grow, and the more that we experience that benefit, and the more our struggles are kind of reduced at the same time. So in the beginning, the first few years, or everyone's got a different time frame with it. And of course, it depends also how much time we are able to devote to it in our life at any given moment. But over time, I feel actually very comfortable in saying this is most likely true for everyone as they practice, that over time, the more that we practice, the more that we stabilize our own energy, the less those things that used to bother us, the less that they even occur to us to be a problem. And we're just developing more and more grace and ease as we move through. So it's just a little bit of information about how all of these things kind of interplay, hopefully suggestive and intriguing for some different ways that that might relate into your own life. And I just want to offer a little bit of info as well about ways that you could learn this. So there are many Animal Reiki teachers out there. I can speak for myself in saying that I love to share these practices with others, and that's why I want to do these kind of info opportunities so people can hear about it a little bit, find out more for themselves from a real person, and not just maybe from a book or a magazine or the internet. And I also teach in person in various locations around the US, and I'm hoping to come back to Europe and offer classes there again. I also teach online, so that for people who can't travel or for whose location I can't get to yet, that we can still interact and get to bring this into more people's lives. And then I do various online events as well, and do recordings like this and put them on my website where you can access them afterwards. So there's various ways to practice with Reiki meditations, Animal Reiki meditations, as well as learn them and become certified in the practice. So for myself, I offer levels 1, 2, and 3 of the traditional Japanese Reiki and Animal Reiki training, certification classes in that, both in person and online, and then also long-term apprenticeships where you can, for 3 months or 6 months or 9 months, work with me on a project that's of your own choosing, something that will help take you deeper into Reiki or Animal Reiki practice. So that's a longer kind of ongoing way to get a lot of support and coaching and direct help with some aspect that personally is very meaningful for you and intrigues you. And I do have, actually on that note, I have a monthly online Reiki practice group. And I mention that now because it happens to be the next one is coming up next Monday, next week. But that's every month. And so that's another opportunity. You can join anytime throughout the year and have access to the recordings of the previous months. And then you keep access to that indefinitely. So you'll have a way to continue to return to those recordings and those meditations and the little bit of teaching and discussions, and be able to continue to enrich your practice with some extra support. So that was something I wanted to let everybody know about as well. Just more ways to continue to learn and to be engaged and to have support. I really want this to be like an online or an ongoing, community of people who are connecting about the same ideas and feeling that interconnection with each other and feeling that social network and support as well. So I'm going to go ahead and unmute and be able to open for some any other questions that might have come up that we have some time to consider. And then there'll also be 2 more of these calls this weekend. So we'll probably go in different directions in those as well. So I invite everybody to come back and find those calls or find the recordings for those too. Maybe there'll be some different details that come out in each one. Okay, so you are now unmuted. Rosalind, I don't know if you'd like to maybe say a little something or ask another question. You're very welcome to.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me to share. I'm finding everything that you've put forth to be exactly what I needed to hear. And it's enlightening to me. Up until hearing this, I always felt, like Reiki on, Reiki off. And when I started to meet you and listen to your words and watch your videos, I began to see that Reiki is really a discipline of life practice. And so even though I've been Reiki attuned since 1997, this is like you said, it's a beginning again. It's a beginning of returning to the highest and best potential of who I can be by staying present with the practice of Reiki, with myself, with others, my family, with animals. I just find it intriguing at this time that it's my love of animals that brings me back to Reiki. But I would say, my question that is here is, when you are in an environment where there are difficult or toxic personalities happening, how can Reiki be best used? There's people in an environment where there's people who are being wounded by the behaviors. I'm in an environment where things feel neutral. I'm responding to it in a neutral, proactive manner. But then I'm sort of like, how when we're in life, we don't want to see the wounded dog. We want to rescue them and help them feel better. So how can Reiki work so that you can stay, in your opinion, in the practice of your Reiki at the same time of, for loss of a better word at this time, being a spiritual warrior, for not engaging but yet working with your Reiki, even though you are going to be put to task to go in a different place?
Yeah, and I think that's such a relatable question for a lot of people, because we do, like I say, we do encounter lots of different types of personalities in our lives, and sometimes they're not always in a comfortable mix for us at that particular moment. Ultimately, our responsibility, I think, as a Reiki practitioner, and the best thing that we can really do in any of these types of situations, is to continue to do our practice for ourselves. And that means when we're not in those situations, as well as maybe when we're in those situations where we're feeling more challenged. The Reiki practice, when we are feeling okay in life, right? When things are going pretty well and we feel good energy, we feel calm and confident, those are great times to continue our practice, because it will help us to be more taken care of and more strong when there is some kind of a challenge or a dip in that well-being. If we were only to wait and do our practice when something happened, we're going to feel a little bit, or maybe a lot more, impacted by that unpleasant thing or that difficult thing. There's a whole deeper practice here about so many different aspects within meditation practices in general too, about non-judgment. So that could be non-judgment of ourself for whatever responses we might have to a situation. That can also be non-judgment towards others. So we want to maybe begin to notice ways that we even are using language in ways that are shaping the way we're thinking about the situation. So one good example of that is I often will get a question about how do we protect ourselves from others? How do we protect ourselves from, some people think we might take on someone else's energy, for example. That's kind of a common language that we hear in the kind of wide world of Reiki. And traditional Reiki practice invites us to practice with the precepts. So do not anger, do not worry. There's a wonderful alternate version of these that says, do not anger, for anger is illusion. Do not worry, fear is distraction. And these are actually linked with later precepts as well that invite us to practice diligently to find our way back to our true original way of being, our intended state of being, which is compassionate, which is open, which is relaxed, which is grounded, which is shining our light. And continuing our practice so that we're shining our light regardless of what is happening around us. So no matter what other people are doing or how they're engaging in the world, we keep coming home to ourselves. We keep staying true to our intended way of being, which of course is a practice itself, to continually heal, to continually practice and be diligent in that faithful practice. That's actually going to help us in those situations with different types of people, because we'll be able to stay better taken care of inside of ourselves. We'll be able to stay more grounded and more open, and those different energies of people's, you know, attitudes or moods will just kind of shift around us, as opposed to getting stuck inside of us, if that makes sense. So rather than those things being things we take on, they'll just kind of, yeah, just be things we might witness and observe without feeling affected by them. So I really think that the best thing that we can possibly do is just to keep our practice going, practicing with the traditional Reiki meditations that I mentioned. Those are really helpful ways where we're developing the hara. That's going to be a really helpful support for any kind of trouble in our life, whether it's, you know, someone in our family who's in transition, right? They're at the end of their life, maybe they're in hospice. That's a time we need really deep self-care. If we're having drama with someone in our life, or at work, or, you know, different people in conflict with each other, conflict can be really upsetting for some people. Being able to continually take really good care of ourselves through the practices within Reiki, that's going to really help us whenever those types of things are coming up, because not all of life is comfortable, right? Not all of the things in life are as filled with ease and contentment, and part of our practice is being comfortable with discomfort to some extent too, and knowing that it's okay, right? No matter what is coming up. Maybe that person is, or animal in that case, could be an animal that's, like we mentioned in this one example, this question, an animal that's aggressive or acting out, or a child that might be acting out, or an adult that might be acting out. All of those are real things that are going on inside of them. They feel very real, whatever is causing that manifestation of that behavior. So the more that we can keep practicing, returning to compassion, staying open, and just being our beautiful light, the more that we are taking care of ourselves. And then there's always that chance that will actually help open up a space for that kind of experience to become an available option for someone else. So they may find over time that they get permission that they haven't been giving themselves to be more centered and grounded. And there are always specific examples that may be a little bit different, where maybe we can actually ask someone, oh, you know, I've learned this practice that has been really meaningful to me in my own life. You know, would you be interested in hearing about it? You know, maybe share with them the precepts. Maybe that's something that they would feel intrigued by and would receive some benefit from in their own life. So there are occasional times when that's something that we can do too, where we can actually ask for permission to be invited to share something with them in that very, you know, humble, non-expectation kind of way. So I think that's another possibility that can sometimes happen with people in our lives. But I think the ultimate practice is just practicing for ourselves and not minding if others are going through their own journey in their own way, right? Their own time frame. And just letting them be who they are at that moment. Just as we would hopefully receive that same fluidity if we were in crisis, or if we were in chaos at a particular point in our lives, which probably all of us have been through at some point, or had that experience, I think, where we were stressed out or overwhelmed or in burnout, and someone else in our life was very stable and grounded and present with us and created space for that without judgment. And they just loved us through it, and they just waited until we worked it out. Or maybe they offered something that helped us in a direct way too. Hugs, you know, just being that calm presence can often be very, very helpful for us to relax, you know, in that deep spiritual way. So I think the more we can take good care spiritually, emotionally, mentally, physically of ourselves, the more available we can be to be present for others and to help in that way. And just keeping things, you know, calm and grounded, and representing that energetically in a space, I think can be very, very helpful. So I hope, hopefully that helps offer some ideas for how that might help in your situation.
The other, if I could ask one small other question.
Sure.
Is very often it comes up with Reiki and the exchange of energy. I mean, I realize my perception is it's not, you're not paying for Reiki, you're paying for time. And in your discipline of Reiki, how do you interpret being paid for your time when you practice Reiki in all the different ways? Because I find myself, sometimes I'm called to ask for a small donation. Sometimes I will give it as a gift because it was needed in the moment. Sometimes, I haven't really put my shingle out with big bucks, but it's more because it is a spiritual practice. How do you address the exchange of energy?
Well, feeling my way into how that question is resonating for me. Ultimately, I think there's a lot of different possible approaches for anyone in particular. Ultimately, I think a lot of these things are perfectly resolved or addressed when we tune into what's right for us at a given moment in time. I think the best thing we can do for ourselves is to feel comfortable with whatever we are asking or offering. So sometimes people gauge that based on their amount of experience or their financial, let's say financial comfort. Maybe some people have a full-time job that gives them all of the resources they need, financial resources they need. And so for them, they might choose that it feels comfortable for them to always donate their Reiki sessions to people, or to run low-cost Reiki clinics where people can do a donation basis or have a very small, say $5 or $10 or $15 or $20 for a certain amount of Reiki. There's a lot of different approaches and strategies here that can be chosen. I think they're all equally valid, and it really depends on someone's individual comfort level at that moment and also what their needs are. So someone who is making Reiki their full career and their full life, if they don't have other financial resources coming in, right? If they don't have another full-time job or someone supporting them, or they don't have, they're not financially independent, let's say, then they're going to need to charge for their time and charge for their sessions. And I think that's also completely okay and appropriate, because it is, in my mind, in my way of thinking about it, Reiki is something that at least can be, let's say it's not necessarily always, because it is up to the individual practitioners, but Reiki is something that I think can be a valid professional practice and can be an actual, and is a profession. There are many very dedicated Reiki practitioners and communities of Reiki practitioners who are in interaction with each other in their maybe local region, who are really helping to set a professional standard for, I mentioned codes of practice and a Reiki code of ethics. There are Reiki codes of ethics out there that help provide a structure for us as professional practitioners. And so when we think of that in the same way that we think of a doctor's office or a social worker or a therapist, we're completely okay with those kinds of professionals offering a service, a professional service, and expecting, a financial payment for that service. And we willingly give those kinds of payments to all kinds of people in our life. So for me, Reiki can be elevated to that status when we are practicing in very professional ways, when we're really dedicated to things like continuing education, professional development, offering a quality service, right? So it's not necessarily that everyone is maybe ready to hang that shingle. Maybe not, certainly, I would say not after and I know this doesn't apply to you personally, but if we just went through one class, we're probably not ready yet, right? We need more practice, we need more experience, we need to spend time volunteering, donating our time in order to gain practice. Sometimes that's how Reiki clinics are run, where students of a particular teacher might be able to gain clinical experience that way. Or we can take our practice out into our communities by volunteering for veterans, volunteering for people with chronic health conditions, maybe cancer treatment centers, things like that. We can be practicing Reiki, certainly with our friends and family or our animals at home. We can be gaining all kinds of experience that way. And that can be the perfect fit for some people indefinitely too. But I'd say it's perfectly okay, in my opinion, for Reiki to be a professional service that involves an exchange of money for that service and for that preparation and the dedication and the time spent in educating yourself, in marketing your services, in running a business, right? If that's actually what our profession is. If our profession is Reiki, I think we should treat it professionally and think of it as a professional practice. But that does ask us to be very professional in our practice of Reiki as well. So given that sort of caveat, I think that we can totally confidently offer Reiki as a professional service, and that it can be totally okay to receive that fund in exchange, just as many other professional services. You know, a plumber is probably not going to be a donation basis, right? They go through a lot of training, they have materials, they have expenses, they have overhead. That's the way that we exchange for that. Some people barter. That's another option. So we might trade professional services with another professional. A lot of people in the holistic world I've seen doing that, where they might trade massage for Reiki or other kinds of practices. I think we just want to always be mindful about not getting stuck in the mindset that, oh, this is only good enough to be traded or to be donated. I think it actually can be good enough, and in many cases is already. You know, we see that if we look out there, we can research what other people are offering as their fee for their services in our area. So it could depend by region and geography too. So like for your example, you could look around and see what other people are charging for Reiki in your county or your state. And that may also educate us a lot about what is possible and what are the different strategies. And then you choose the one that feels the best for you at this time, knowing that you can always change it. People will over time sometimes raise their rates, or they'll change their pricing strategy and structure. They may add on a donation-based option. And once we have enough, I think, trust in ourselves and confidence in our practice, we'll know that moment and we'll draw those people to us as well, at least hopefully. I see that for many people, that once they have, if they have a full client calendar, at some point they may choose to raise their rates so that they can also even kind of create more space in their schedule, and just to be able to have that devoted time for self-care as well, because we don't want to overextend either by offering our service so much that we're not in balance with our other needs. So yeah, financial needs are important, and they are a real consideration for people. I definitely always advocate for people being ready to charge for their services, and then charging what feels comfortable, and knowing that it's okay to change that over time. So maybe someone starts out, I'm just going to throw out random numbers, but maybe someone starts out at $45 or $35 when they're a student or beginning to gain experience. And then once they've been in practice for, several years, maybe they raise it, then it's up to 65, or maybe they offer a special service that's a longer package or a specialized focus that helps them stand out and offer something unique, and then they can price according to that. So yeah, there's a lot of different specifics, but I think ultimately it's all okay. Whatever we choose, whatever feels right for us, that's where our confidence is going to be, and that's when we're going to be really authentic to ourselves and offering our best self to others. Yeah, if we're in disharmony within ourselves, that's going to convey, it's going to communicate, and people will notice when we feel uncomfortable or in conflict in some way. They may not understand what the conflict is about, but they just might perceive it. So I think it's good to be really content with whatever you create. That way you can just feel, yeah, this is going to work. This is going to be really good. Yeah.
Thank you. You've answered so much. I appreciate this so wholeheartedly. Thank you.
Oh, you're so welcome. I appreciate you being here and having, questions that can be applied to your own life, and then also maybe will help someone else listening too.
I hope so. Yes, thank you. Are there other people on the call with us at this time?
Not at the moment, not live, but I feel sure that they will be, accessing the recording afterward and getting to join us in that way, in the sort of extended sense.
Well, right now I feel very at peace and grounded in the fact that I'm on the right path now for the way I want to live with Reiki. And The only, um, going back to something you said with Animal Reiki, where we don't need to touch and that you can be 10 to 15 feet away. What does that feel like for you? Because up until now, I've always worked with people and animals with touch.
Hmm.
And I think it has been a comfort, and maybe I'm going to say the word, even though it might sound derogatory, a crutch.
Hmm.
Because energetically, when you're right there, I get sensations and feelings. And the way Reiki works for me is I actually can sort of like have conversations with their people's organs. And I don't speak out loud about it, but I'll get a sense of like, the woman's having her period. I once did a Reiki session on a young man. He was 28, and his liver felt different than anyone else's liver I had ever, energetically passed through. And then I learned that he has never in his life ever drank alcohol.
Hmm.
So that was, another time I worked with a woman and she had multiple sclerosis. This was when I was first doing Reiki as a student and learning, I approached it, do 100 healings, you'll know what Reiki is, then go on and learn more.
Hmm.
And I shared that with you in another conversation. But yeah, that's what I'm, like, how does it feel different than when you're touching? When do you, is it a heat? Is it a vibration? Are you still able to get the sensations of what's going on inside of the body? Are you in a more meditative state, closing your eyes and, like, how does that flow for you? And this will be my last question for this evening. Thank you.
Well, and I'll tell you what, this is a much, much longer
Oh, okay.
response than probably what you're anticipating too. That's kind of why I'm smiling, is because there's actually so many different things here that we could talk about. So we'll probably need to come back to that other times too. But it's a great question, and I think we can kind of choose the short and sweet, kind of approach for now. But just trust that, yeah, it is the beginning, and there is a lot more of the mindset that I think is so relevant here. But that's something that we kind of, talk about a lot more in the classes, and it just takes a little more time to kind of unpack all of those things. But it's really wonderful, and it's so right on, kind of some of the heart of all of this content. So one thing I want to share is that the sensations of Reiki really can vary person to person, session to session, moment to moment. And so we, in the traditional Reiki practice, and in Animal Reiki too, because it's based on the traditional Reiki practice, we try not to actually, one of our ethical practices is not to interpret meanings out of those different sensations. So it is, as you sort of identified, a very meditative practice of really feeling our interconnection, and knowing that when we're in that deep space of interconnection, that really anything can find balance and be transformed. So we don't even need to know what might be experiencing a benefit or not. So it's really a wonderful practice of helping us to develop that openness that we were talking about before, in just ways that we can't even articulate at this time, right? Like ways that we'll feel it, but maybe we can't label it or can't put it into words even. Trying to think back to all of the wonderful things that you asked and said. So for me personally, when I practice Reiki with someone using touch or without touch, I don't necessarily experience the sensation of Reiki differently. There may be specific, like say, if my hand is touching someone, I may feel heat at my hand in that area. Whereas if I were away from them, I couldn't have that experience of heat at that particular part of their body, right? Because I'm not touching that part of the body. But my whole body is involved in the process, whether I'm touching them or not. So because I'm practicing being Reiki, I will personally, I typically experience a lot of warmth. And other people have told me, even when I haven't felt warmth, they feel a lot of warmth, like from my hands or near me. So that seems to be a kind of common way that I experience Reiki, and that people then experience Reiki with me, is they'll sense that warmth and that heat, which a lot of people experience with Reiki too. Reiki also, I mean, not Reiki level 2, but also with Reiki. For me, I feel often when I'm practicing the meditations, when I'm experiencing Reiki treatment with someone, offering them Reiki, I'll feel a lot of warmth, especially in my core. But it's really, your whole being. So it's not any one specific part of the body. There is a practice within Reiki where we are tuning into, in a very intentional way, where we're tuning into those sensations of ki around someone's physical body. This is a practice with the human Reiki teachings, the traditional Reiki teachings. So in Byosen Reikan Ho, for example, we're taught about gently letting our hand move around that individual, their physical body, and noticing those sensations of ki. And then when we notice an area that seems to have one of those sensations, whether for us at that moment it might be heat or cold or tingling or a sort of magnetic pull feeling where we kind of don't want to pull our hand away from that area, some sensation like that. It's a very intuitive process where we try to let our analytical mind not be part of the process quite so much and let our body just be in harmony with that energetic space. And then we can maybe hold our hands in that area for a period of time until that sensation feels like it's starting to transform, if we have that much time. Sometimes that could take longer than we have, but we'll just intuitively then maybe return to that gentle movement around the body, and then we notice another area of that sensation of ki, and we offer Reiki there. So that is a slightly different practice than what we would advocate for within Animal Reiki. This is a much longer topic about when we might use touch and when we wouldn't. But the sort of short version is to say that we let the animal choose. In Animal Reiki, we start from that distance away. We are sitting in meditation with them, creating a space where Reiki is present and available. And if the animal wants to join us in that space, either energetically, with intention, or physically with their body, that they're welcome to. And this is, of course, with animals that we would have permission to touch, not just from the animal, but also from their human caregiver, who is a very real part of the relationship, the healing relationship too. And we can talk more about that another time too. So if that animal is one that we have permission to touch, and the animal decides that they would like to come to us for more physical proximity, closeness, or actual touch, then they're welcome to do that. But we, in this practice, part of our ethics is to not go out to them and force them into a scenario of touch. But if they ask for touch in those ways, so that could be many things. That could be they come up and lean up against us, or they might actually push a part of their body into our hand that's available to them, or they might just crawl up on our lap. We stay in our meditation and we let them come and go as they please. So that's a really interesting and different way of experiencing the whole treatment process. But the feeling of Reiki energy within ourselves could be just the same as when we're offering Reiki to someone else. When we begin to experience being Reiki with someone, even when we're doing a hands-on treatment, that feeling of energy becomes part of our whole being, part of our whole body. And then maybe the only difference might be that our hands just are not physically touching the animal or the individual. Because of course we could practice the Animal Reiki practices, and we actually do this in my classes, where the students will pair up with each other and they'll practice the Animal Reiki techniques with each other, where one of them is the practitioner and one of them is the client, quote unquote. So one of them is doing the practice of the technique. The other one is just there to relax and experience whatever that might feel like. So we actually can practice this with humans too, even though we weren't taught that initially. I think, again, it's one of those very expansive ways that we can understand Reiki in a deeper way and then practice it in a very expansive way without this kind of restrictions of the mind, without constricted thinking or limited thinking. And then see where that takes us energetically, see what that does with our experience of Reiki energy, and our whole concept of Reiki. So actually, we could practice all of our treatments in this way, and not even need touch at all, even though we're in person in the same room with someone. Yeah, it's really fun. And of course, this does open up lots of opportunities for different types of clients with different types of needs too. So I
Well,
think
thank
that's
you
really cool.
so much. I mean, I truly feel that I have come back to myself in this conversation, and of just listening, and as I said, being a sponge, and I'm in a position right now where others are looking for guidance, and I see, after listening to everything I've heard tonight, that the answer is for me to say to them, go back to your Reiki practice.
Mm.
For those that are ready to move, go back to Reiki. I'm going to do a little more research about it. I mean, I'm familiar with Reiki ethics, but I'm just going to revisit what's on the web and then try to connect them and say, the more we practice Reiki for ourselves, the more that we stay in the integrity of our Reiki practice, irregardless of what's going on around us, we will rise to the
Mm.
top, like cream, we will rise to the top,
Mm.
and not to engage in the negative, but just send it love, send it Reiki. And so this is just what I needed to hear at this time, and I really am so happy that I can continue to be a part of this community going forward.
Mm.
Thank you.
No, thank you. You're so welcome. And I'll just say on that there, just for clarification, for those who also might need that clarification, that there are many different Reiki codes of ethics. So there's not just one that applies to the entire Reiki community, because as we've said, there are so many different lineages and styles of Reiki and many different Reiki professional organizations. So the two that I work with are, one is by the Shibumi International Reiki Association, and that is the traditional Reiki lineage that I studied in and that I teach. That one is more towards kind of Reiki practice in general and with humans. And then I also advocate for the Animal Reiki Code of Ethics, which you can search for. And I'll also provide links to everybody who signed up for this call. I'll provide some links, or I'll put them in the video description or things like that, so I can share some direct links to those for people's interest. But then, yeah, there are also other Reiki codes of ethics that different Reiki professional organizations have developed, and they might look a little different. I'm certainly not, I haven't memorized them all. I've seen many of them, but I think it's really good to read maybe some different ones and see if there's one in particular that resonates with you, that feels really good. So yeah, but there are multiple options out there. I just wanted to clarify that. And I think, ultimately they invite us to continually work on ourselves and to come back to an understanding that it's not up to us to change others, to quote unquote fix others. The only person that we can change is ourselves. And so if we're feeling torn up by a situation, that's an invitation for us to learn more about ourselves and to discover more about what that is inviting us to discover, and to continually keep our attention focused in that way. And it is, I believe, that is a service to the world, because the more that we get clear, the more that we become whole, the more that we can contribute, and the more ways that we can model that for others, but not in a way that's about ego or posturing, right? In a very authentic way, in a way that really speaks to personal integrity. So we are being kind of quiet, peaceful mountains, or there's another wonderful metaphor of being a lighthouse and just shining our light, but that others will take from that light what they need. So they will either use it as a beacon to come into shore, or maybe that's their beacon that they need to go the other direction or change direction in some way, right? We don't know how the boat will perceive the light or use the light, but our purpose is just to be the light and not to decide for others what they need at that time, but just to offer that peaceful space, and to continue to grow and in our own self. And that will be such a powerful contribution to the world and to those situations. Maybe not in the first moment. Maybe it'll be a year later, you know, and that memory will come back, or we'll keep practicing and we'll keep shining that light of compassion and non-judgment for others. So yeah. Well, thank you very, very much for being here, and thanks for participating and contributing. And thanks to everyone else who also contributed, you know, before and will come into this space after. And everybody's welcome to continue this conversation on Facebook or over email. And yeah, we can continue to talk about these things. And of course, if anyone is interested in going deeper, feel free to reach out to me too, and we can talk about what that might look like for anyone on an individual level too. Just resources, happy to share or happy to guide as well. So thank you again. And I think we'll bring this one to a close for now. And I look forward to getting to connect with you many times going forward.
Thank you. I'm actually going to reach out to my compadre that was attuned with me in my class that still practices, and encourage him to connect to you too. So you might be getting someone reaching out to you from San Diego.
Oh, lovely. Oh, that'd be beautiful.
Okay.
It's the wonder of the internet and telephones and all of these things these days.
Yeah, it's really wonderful.
Adds so many options for connection and learning and growth. It's just amazing. I love it.
Thank you so much, Kat.
Thank you, Rosalind. Have a really beautiful evening.
You too. Be well.
Thank you.
Bye now.